And we're live. Welcome back to today's national weather forecast. It's going to be a good Friday forecast today because it's mostly good news to go over. You can see there is still that cold Arctic air over Texas and Oklahoma, but the good news is that's going to start easing up throughout the day today, and then that warming trend should be continuing what looks to be for the next 2 weeks. And by this time next week, we're actually above average temperatures down there. And also, the weather is easing up a little bit when it comes to precipitation. It doesn't look like we have any major, massive snowstorms in the future like we've seemed to have over and over again the last 2 weeks. But there is one storm that's coming through the northwest that we're going to track as it moves across the country, goes into the Midwest, and then finally into the Northeast. We will follow that one because that's the storm that's going to be driving a lot of the winter weather over the next few days and into the start of next week. And then towards the end of the video, we're going to do something that is actually completely new. We're going to take a look at some of the climate forecast for what we can be expecting over the next week, the next 2 weeks, the next month, and even the next 3 months to just take a broad look at what could be expected over the rest of this winter. And I will say two things. First, as I just showed, we're going to be talking about a lot of different weather stories. So if you're only interested in one, you can go down in the comments below where I put the timestamps for the different regions we're going to be talking about. And two, there's actually a scheduled PG&E power outage where I am right now. So if this live stream goes out halfway through the video, then you know what happens. But we'll do our best to get this all in before the power goes out. So good place to start is just looking at the warnings map, and this is actually pretty encouraging today. For the most part, there's not all that much going on across the country, but we do have 3 regions, and that is the 3 regions we're going to be diving into the most today. We have Winter Storm Viola. That's the very last traces of that system that's been moving slowly across the country for basically what we've been talking about all week long. And then we have that hard freeze warning in Texas. I think that's actually the biggest part of the forecast today. So that's what we're going to go over first, because right now that cold Arctic air is still there. But the good news is it's not going to be lasting for that much longer. You see, we also have these winter weather advisories in the Pacific Northwest. That has to do with that storm system that we're then going to be tracking all the way across the country as it brings some snow to the Midwest and then finally to the Northeast. That's the big storm, or it's not a big storm, but that's the snowstorm that's going to be driving our weather throughout the weekend, so we'll take a look at that as well. But again, that first thing I want to go into is that hard freeze warning we were just looking at down here in Texas, going into Louisiana, even into Mississippi as well, because unfortunately the cold air still is over this region. You can see temperatures 35 to 40 degrees below average at this current time and throughout the day today. So the warming trend, believe it or not, this is actually warmer than it has been in the last few days, but it's certainly still cold. That will be continuing throughout the day today, but then it's just going to start to ease up. It'll continue to weaken, and you'll notice this shows how far off of the average you are. If we go back to the beginning, you can see throughout almost all of Texas, we're 35 degrees below average temperatures into Oklahoma, Arkansas as well. As I click through this map, this is now getting into Saturday and then into Sunday. You'll notice even though it's still slightly cold over the region, that's what it is. It's just slightly cold. We no longer are 35 degrees below average. We're just maybe 8 to 10 degrees below average. And some of that cold air, as that system moves east, starts to push into the Midwest, finally the Northeast, and then it's gone. And then there's even better news as we get into the start of next week, getting into Tuesday, next Wednesday. You can see almost the entire eastern half of the country has above average temperatures, starting out up in the north, just like that cold air started out here about 2 weeks ago. We're going to be about 15 degrees above average, and then that's going to work its way, and eventually I'll show the climate map in a second, but in the grand average of our next 2 weeks, basically the entire eastern half of the country should be above average temperatures. So let's actually look at the temperatures themselves, not just the averages. And I want to zoom in on Texas here, going into Louisiana and Arkansas, because that is where that freeze warning is, and that might be the big story for the day. Let's look at the temperature highs, because that's what we've been looking at throughout this last week. That already looks much better than it did yesterday. An easy way to look at this map is the blue color here is where you're below freezing. The green color is where you're above freezing, so 32 degrees. Yesterday, almost all of Texas for their daytime high was still in that below freezing. The day before that, all of Texas was in the teens, and then even further into the past, there were areas of Texas that were actually below zero. So you can see your daytime highs today are looking much better. We got numerous places even working into the 40s. Northeastern Texas, where that hard freeze warning still is in effect, is, as you can see, still below freezing. And I believe it's still going to be rather cold overnight. That's why we have that hard freeze warning in effect stretching into Arkansas and Louisiana as well. Those are your overnight temperatures where most of Texas gets back into below 32 degrees, getting into the teens in some places. But then when we go to Saturday, basically all of Texas is above freezing. That's the first time we've seen this in quite some time, and I know that's going to be a very welcomed sight for everyone in Texas who's been having to deal with this cold with their power off. So that's what's been big about this story. If all this cold Arctic air was down here, it would be inconvenient and, not the best, but it wouldn't have been that big of a deal. The reason that all that cold air became such a big deal in Texas was because it was so cold that it actually froze up a lot of the power facilities, and then once people lose power, they can't turn the heaters on in their house. But as you can see, things are looking up. Some warm air is returning, and you can actually see why this warm air is returning. This is something I actually hadn't noticed before. This low moving through, that's, I believe, actually the storm that's bringing some snow to the Midwest that we're going to be looking at later. You can see what that's doing to the wind. So the winds flow into this low pressure system, especially on the right side here, because it spins counterclockwise. So on the right side, it's pulling this air in. And that's taking this warm air from the Gulf of Mexico and just pushing it right over Texas and pushing that cold air out of the region. I bet we can actually, if we click back here, I bet we can actually see that cold air and that wind start to push those warm temperatures in. Looks to be exactly what happened right there. So then as we get to Sunday, that warm-up's going to continue even more. Places like Dallas getting into the mid-50s, Houston even getting into the 60s. So that, I'm happy to say that cold blast of Arctic air looks like it's finally going to be leaving, and that warming trend should continue for quite some time. This is the average for what kind of temperatures you can expect from 6 to 10 days out. It's the average of those, and you can see most of Texas getting back into the mild temperature range, even parts expected to be above average. And then when we go even further in the forecast, you can see same trend continues again. This is getting an average of 8 to 14 days out. Eastern half of the country is above average temperatures. Western half of the country is below average temperatures. So again, we do have that hard freeze warning there. That is most likely the big concern for the forecast today, but temperatures are going to be warming up in the next few days, and towards the start of next week, Texas might actually be back into the 60s. But one other thing on this map to notice here is what's going on in the Pacific Northwest, where we have those winter storm advisories starting to show up, and that has to do with the storm that's going to be stretching across the country throughout the next couple of days. So let's just start right there, because that's actually where this storm currently is. We'll also mention the very lingering effects of Winter Storm Viola here, but this is, I think, what's going to be driving your weather throughout the weekend, so that's what we're going to focus on for the majority of this video. So that cold air that we saw is down in over the northwest now. That's allowing that storm to come in, bring some snowfall to places like Washington and Oregon, And then what we're going to be doing throughout this video is following the storm. Here you can see Sunday, it gets right over Texas. Remember, that's when it was bringing in all that warm air from the Gulf of Mexico. It's going to dip down. What that's also going to do is bring in some moisture. Excuse me. And so that's going to bring in some moisture. And then that low is going to move back up into the Midwest. That's going to bring some snow to places like Minnesota, Illinois, and then especially Michigan. We're going to be zeroing in on Michigan to see the snowfall totals there, and then that storm is going to continue to push into the Northeast. So we'll check out that snow as well. If we want to see that another way, there's Winter Storm Viola, the very last effects as it pushes up into the Northeast. They're going to continue to get some snow throughout the day today, but what we're looking at is this trough that you're going to see creeping down into Washington. It's actually already here. So right, if we get to where we are in the forecast right now, you can see that trough has already started to push in. It's going to dig down. Remember, we said it digs all the way down into Texas. That's where it's pulling in the moisture to fuel the precipitation for the storm, but then it's also pushing in that warm air to warm up Texas, who certainly needs it right now. Then that trough will work its way through the Midwest, bring some snow there, and then finally work its way into the Northeast. So that's what we're going to be following throughout the lifetime of the storm. If we want to see it another way, this shows vorticity. That basically means upward vertical motion. You can think of it as just storm energy. For example, you can see all that energy that we had with Winter Storm Viola. That's why that was such a major storm, as it brought large amounts of ice all the way from Texas into Virginia, and then now it's currently up here by Massachusetts, continuing to bring some snow to the northwest. What we're looking at, though, is this new trough pushing down here, and you'll notice all that storm energy that's going to be funneling into California at some point on Saturday. We'll look at the exact timing for it there, but right now is the very first part of the system pushing in, bringing some snow to Washington and Oregon. So if we want to just take a broad look at the precipitation we can expect over the next couple of days, that's just clicking through. You can see there's still some heavy rain down in Georgia and Florida. Let's actually go back to the warnings map. I don't believe there was any. Where is that warnings map? There it is. It doesn't look like there's any more flood warnings in place throughout Georgia and Florida anymore. So that's actually good news, because that was something we were looking at yesterday. All of Georgia was in that flood warning. Florida was as well, even a tornado watch too. But it looks like they're in the clear at this point. So let's see if I can. Hey, I actually found it on the first try. I have about 60 tabs open, so that was kind of surprising. You can see they are still expected to get maybe 1 to 2 inches of rain as the very trailing effects of Viola move off into the Atlantic there. And then you can see Northern California into Oregon, where we have that blast of energy I was just showing on the vorticity map. That's going to bring maybe 1 inch of rain to the California-Oregon border up there. And then you can actually see this storm creeping across the country and then working its way into the Midwest. It's going to bring mostly rain to the southeast, as you can see. Doesn't look like it's going to bring too much rain to the southeast. What we want to focus on more is that snowfall as it builds into the Midwest and Northeast. But first, before we look at the snowfall, let's look at if any ice is expected to accumulate over the next week. This might be the key thing to look out, because this has been the key story for the entire last week. It's been an ice storm in Texas, then an ice storm in Tennessee, then Kentucky, then Virginia, and it seems like we've just been having endless ice storms, and the reason for that is that cold Arctic air that's been allowing all those ice storms to form. It's been that cold air where you're getting below freezing temperatures all the way down in Texas is what's been allowing all these ice storms to happen. But as we talked about in the beginning of this video, that cold air is leaving. So that should be what's being shown on this map as well. As we click through here, throughout the day today, there's going to be some last effects of Viola. So that most of this fell this morning. That's showing ice falling into North Carolina and Virginia. Most of that fell this morning. It will continue a little bit throughout this afternoon, so we'll look at the exact timing on that. But I'm happy to continue to click through this getting into Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. Let's see how far we can go. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. No more ice popping up for all of the United States. That is absolutely great to see because we've been having the ice storms. That's been causing a lot of power outages, a lot of travel concerns. There was a 100-car pileup in Texas at one point. So it's good to see that as of right now, the forecast does not have any more ice piling up except for what's piling up currently in Virginia right there. So it looks like we're going to be in the clear for the next week. I will keep my eye on this map because we certainly know how forecast models like to change. That's showing the snow that's falling in the northwest right now. That's showing the last little effects of Winter Storm Viola, bringing maybe 2 to 4 inches left to the northeast right there. And then watch as this storm just spreads across the country, works into, that's where it works down south, brings in that moisture, and then it moves into the Midwest, drops maybe 4 to 6 inches of snow to parts of Michigan, especially where we get that lake effect. And then that one's going to move into the Northeast and bring some totals of maybe 6 to 8 inches to places like Pennsylvania, New York, Vermont, getting into Massachusetts a little bit as well. But you can also see on the trail end of that system, the snow continues to fall in Washington and Oregon. That bullseye in Washington up there could be getting 2 to 3 feet of snow. So that's actually the place I want to look at first because that's clearly the bullseye when it comes to this storm as it moves across the country. As you can see, this storm has already begun. It's started to move in yesterday morning. We were getting snow in the Cascades. It's now worked all the way into Idaho, Nevada, and Montana as well. It almost looks like it's going to ease up as we get throughout this afternoon, but you'll notice the Cascades just continue to be covered in snowfall this entire time. Even though it's light snowfall, it's just constant. So that's where your accumulations can continue to pile up because you're just constantly getting more and more snow, piling up those totals every second of the day. That is a key spot we're going to look at as well. There's a point in this storm where that dips down into California. So we're going to look at that where it looks like the California coast is going to be getting heavy rain and parts of Northern California will be getting heavy snow. That's going to move off. That's what we're going to be following into the Midwest. And then Washington and Oregon will continue to pick up snow because there's another system moving in right behind it. You can see that moves almost right when that storm is moving off into the central parts of the country. That new system follows in right behind it. We get more of that heavy snow in the Cascades, and that continues through Sunday and Monday as well. So that's why that bullseye right there is where we're going to see the greatest snow accumulations as we click through this map. Getting into Monday and Tuesday, parts of the northern Cascades in Washington have picked up 3 to possibly even 4 feet of snow. Down in Oregon, it's more medium. It's over a foot of snow, which is certainly still something. And then as you get down into California, it's 6 to 8 inches. So it goes from 2 feet to 1 foot to less than a foot because this is mostly a northern storm. And that second storm that pushed through looked like it was mostly just hitting Washington there. So let's actually zoom in on Washington to see when that second blast of the storm is going to be pushing through. We don't really have to worry about when this current system is pushing through because you can see it's already here. This is 10 a.m. Just getting some light snow throughout the day today as that system continues to move off into the middle parts of the country. But that's the key thing. There's never a point where the snow completely leaves the Cascades. We're just constantly adding more and more to the totals. So then right there, I'd say that's when the first system is basically gone. That's getting into Saturday morning. And then around 4 p.m., we get the first little traces of that new system pushing in. By 10 p.m. on Saturday, that's when you start to see the heavier snowfall totals arrive to Washington. And then right there, it looks like it's arrived. 4 a.m. Sunday, getting 0.2 to 0.5 inches per hour of snowfall building into the Cascades of Washington. And then that heavy snowfall is going to continue and actually get stronger as we get into Sunday night and Monday morning. We're going to get a blast. That's right when the full low is moving through the state. That's where we're getting over 0.5 inches per hour of snowfall. and that's going to continue to just bring more and more snow to Washington. That's a key place we're most likely going to be talking about for the next, even getting into the start of next week. So if we want to see the totals, see we're already starting to pile up, and then let's just go to next Tuesday and Wednesday to see where we're going to be at. Looks like the northern Cascades will be around 2 to 3, possibly even 4 feet of snow right there. Now, the other part of the storm that I want to focus in on while we're in the Pacific Northwest is that little part. So right now, you can see all that. This is, just think of it as storm energy. You can see it's mostly over Washington and Oregon, starting to work its way into Montana and Wyoming. There's a key part of the storm, though, right around Saturday morning, where you notice the trough of this and the low itself dips all the way down into California, and you can just see all that energy right over Northern California there. So that is a place that we want to keep our eye on and see if, looking at the precipitation map, if we can see where that little burst of precipitation comes in, where that storm energy moves into Northern California. Let's go, I think this is not, yeah, that wasn't at the start of the map right there. So 10 p.m. on Thursday, starting to already get some rain in Northern California. We're looking at Friday morning though. That's where the confusion is. This map goes back a little farther than it was supposed to. So looking at 10 a.m. Friday, you can see that rain is going to start pushing into the South Bay. Looking out my window, it actually still looks kind of sunny right now. So that could be pushing in the next hour or two. I'll have to keep my eye out for that. And then some light snow building into the Sierras. That's that first part of the system. Just the early traces of rain and snowfall. Just light, nothing to get too excited about there. This is the part where that storm energy moves in, right about there. So looking at it on the precipitation map, this looks to be about 10 p.m. tonight. That's where that heavy snow builds into Northern California, and we get some heavy rain along the coast. We'll look at the rainfall totals in a second. They're actually pretty significant for Northern California. Then we're going to get that, you can actually see the low right there, down all the way in central parts of California, working into Nevada. That gives you a good idea of how far this low is dipping down when it was originally up in Washington. At that point, that's where we're getting some higher snow in places, or higher snow totals in places like Tahoe, and then that system is going to leave. Let's just click through here and see if we get any of that next system that's pushing through. As of right now, it looks like we're missing out on that second system that we saw bringing so much snow to Washington. So let's just go back here. It looks like we are currently getting some rain and snow, and then the bulk of it comes in tonight, and then by about 10 a.m. Saturday morning, we're in the clear, and we should be in the clear throughout the rest of this weekend. That's nice to see. It'll be good to maybe be able to get outside, go to the beach, or go hiking possibly. Looks like it's going to be clear precipitation-wise when that wasn't what past forecast models were showing. So let's just click through, see how much rain we're going to be getting. You can see the bullseye is up in the northern parts of California where we're expected to get over an inch. Down here in the Bay Area, that's where our totals are lighter. Lucky to get 1/10 of an inch in San Jose, lucky to get 1/2 an inch throughout places like San Francisco, working into the North Bay. And then if we look at the snowfall, let's see what places in the Sierras and places like Tahoe are going to be getting. Possibly up to a foot, more likely to be in that 6 to 8 inch range, where majority of it looks to be falling in the very northern parts of California. If there's one thing I'd say about this storm, it doesn't look like SoCal is going to be getting any of it, because it is moving for the most part through the northern parts of the state. So just looking at the impacts that are expected overall, you can see my eye first goes to Wyoming here, where actually major to extreme impacts are expected. If you live in that region, be sure to stay updated with your local resources about what's going on right there. Now let's zoom in on Washington, where we saw over the next few days, working into the start of next week, we're getting maybe 3 to 4 feet of snow. Let's just zoom in there. You can see where we have those moderate to even extreme impacts, but it's mostly in our higher elevations. looks like Seattle, you're for the most part out of that impact territory. And then it's stretching down into California, but in California, we're just getting limited impacts because it's not considered all that big of a storm. We're just getting light rain and snow. I will zoom in there though. It actually is reaching farther south than I expected. We don't usually do this, but I am going to try to change this to Southern California to see if it actually is pushing all the way down there, because the fact that it shows that the impacts are all the way down working into Southern California must mean that there's some rain and snow. This is completely unprepared. So give me a break if, actually it does look like there's some rain and snow going all the way down. Doesn't look like it's going to stretch all the way into Los Angeles and farther into San Diego though. So I'm going to actually stick by my original statement that Southern California missing out on the storm. Does look like the central California will be getting some of that rain and snow. Just interesting to point that out there. So sorry for the quick detour that we had to go on. I was just curious to see what was going on there. And then if we follow those impacts, you can actually follow them as this storm moves across the country. It dips down into Wyoming, and then it moves up into the Midwest. But you can see just minor impacts to limited impacts expected throughout the Midwest with this storm. So let's follow it as it moves across the country. There you see it dipping down. That's where it starts to get that moisture from the Gulf of Mexico, start to bring down some of that cold air, and then it pushes some snow into places like Wisconsin, northern Illinois, and then Michigan looks to be the bullseye of where we're getting that snow in the Midwest as we follow that storm across. We can also follow it across by looking at this map. That's the trough that we're looking at right there that's associated with this storm. That dips down right there. Showed this earlier. That's where it's pulling in this moisture, which is the moisture that it needs to bring that snow and rain to the Midwest. Moves up here, and then eventually it moves off into the Northeast. But before it gets to the Northeast, it will be making a quick detour to the Midwest. So let's see when it's first going to show up. Looks like it's first moving in about 1 p.m. Sunday afternoon. That's a little ways off in the forecast, so the timing of that's most likely going to change. But think of midday Sunday. That storm starts to first show up. Then it spreads into Wisconsin, northern Illinois, and then that snow covers all of lower Michigan right there. But where your temperatures are warmer, where that low has actually been pulling in some of those warm temperatures from the Gulf of Mexico, that's where Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio, for the most part, are getting rain with that system as it moves through. So if we want to just take a quick look at the snowfall totals, looks like over the next day or two, getting into Sunday, we will be getting some lake effect snow here in Michigan, and then that's where this new system starts to push in, brings maybe 1 to 3 inches to places like Iowa, Wisconsin, maybe 2 to 4 inches as we get into northern Illinois, and then the bulk of this storm looks to be falling in Michigan, where we should be getting 2 to 5 inches there, which is most likely due to some of that lake effect that we're going to be getting there. That's where it can pick up a little bit more moisture, and then it drops it right over Michigan. That's something to always follow when you're trying to figure out where a storm is going to be dropping a lot of precipitation. To drop the precipitation in the first place, it has to be getting some moisture from somewhere. So down, for example, with that storm we were looking at earlier this week, Winter Storm Viola, after it was getting all that Gulf of Mexico moisture, that's when it was able to drop it into the southeast, getting 3 to 4 inches of rain down there. And then the same thing is going on here. As it moves over the lake, it takes up some of that moisture and immediately drops it right over Michigan there. So that's the key place I want to look at here. There you can see some of that lake effect throughout your day today. That's 1 p.m. Friday, getting some of that lake effect snow. And then what looks to be clear Saturday and most of Sunday, and then 7 p.m. is where that storm starts to show up from Michigan. By 1 a.m. on Monday, that's where all of lower Michigan is covered with that snow, with the heavier rates right along the lakefront where you're closest to where that moisture is being picked up. Then that's going to continue. So when was the bulk timing of that? That's 7 p.m. Sunday. And entire lower part of Michigan is covered with that snow 1 a.m. Monday, and then it looks to be slowly easing off by 7 a.m. Monday, and by 1 p.m. Monday, it's gone. So looks to be mostly a nighttime storm for Michigan. When you're waking up Monday morning, you'll most likely be waking up to some snowfall. How much snowfall? Let's click through here and find out. So that's how much lake effect you're getting. Pretty inconsequential, maybe a half an inch of lake effect snow. And then as that new system moves in, that's where places along the lake get maybe 2 to 6 inches of snow, and then places farther away from that lake effect action are getting 2 to 3 inches. So still something to think about there. Basically all of Michigan getting snow though. It's just that one little tiny area right there that might be missing out on the storm. Although if we continue to click through, they eventually get some as we get into midweek next week. So all of lower Michigan should be getting some snow by next Wednesday. So let's continue to follow this storm as it moves across the country. There it is right now over the Pacific Northwest. Dips down, gets some moisture from the Gulf of Mexico, moves into the Midwest, and then you can see it is moving into the Northeast, but it's also bringing some heavy rain down to places like West Virginia and Virginia. So let's actually go down there first. We'll go to the Northeast last because I also want to mention Winter Storm Viola, which is still bringing some effects there. So as that system, that's actually the last effects of Winter Storm Viola. That was early this morning as it was still bringing ice to places like Virginia. That one is basically gone. That one's gone, so we're not spending too much time on that for this region. What we're interested in is that next storm coming in. Looks like it. First rain starts to show up early Monday morning in places like Kentucky and Tennessee, and then it spreads into West Virginia and Virginia as we get into about 1 p.m. on Monday. So throughout the weekend, let's actually go back and see. So the storm you had early this morning and throughout the last day or two, that one is gone by this evening, officially gone. And then as we get into Saturday, looks like you're in the clear. Sunday, you're in the clear. And then Sunday night is where that new system starts to show up. Getting into Monday morning is where that rain and snow spreads out across the region. For the most part, looks like it's going to be rain throughout West Virginia and Virginia. That's something that's different than what we've been seeing throughout this entire week. The main reason for that is because of what we talked about earlier. That Arctic blast of cold air that's been over the country for 2 weeks is leaving. It's weakening, and we're actually going to be moving into above average temperatures. So because the temperatures are warmer, instead of getting that ice and that snow that has just been creating major impacts throughout the last couple days here, with the warmer temperatures, this new system should just be bringing rain. And it looks like some heavier rain to parts of North Carolina and Virginia. So if we want to see how much rain overall, that's clicking through the lifetime of this storm. Doesn't look like it's actually all that much. Looks like combined with that last storm we just had, parts of North Carolina getting an inch, maybe an inch and a half of rain. But looking at the warnings map, actually let's see if we can do that. That's risky because it might be hard to find that tab again. But looking at the warnings map, there are slight flood concerns here in North Carolina, but I believe that's mostly due to Winter Storm Viola, which is leaving. So I don't think we have any flood concerns with this next system that's going to be moving through. Let's just keep clicking through. There it is. The next one looks like it'll just bring maybe a half an inch to an inch of rain at most. So the big thing we're also thinking about is if any ice is going to be falling. The majority of it has already fallen. We're getting now into this morning and this afternoon. That is what fell. We got a lot more of it yesterday. Still picked up maybe a quarter of an inch to a half an inch of ice early this morning, and still building in as we get into this afternoon. So that is still something to think about if you live throughout North Carolina into Virginia, getting into all the way up into New Jersey. It only takes about a tenth of an inch of ice for your roadways to get dangerous. But the good news is our temperatures are going to start warming up. That's going to melt the ice, and then it doesn't look, as we click through here into Saturday, Sunday, Monday, it doesn't look like we're going to be getting any more ice. So that big ice storm that we just had doesn't look like it's going to be happening again soon because of those warming temperatures. We can actually see that better. It looks like 7 a.m. this morning. That's where ice was still filling into Virginia. Looks like we're in the clear as we get into 1 p.m. Might still be some on the ground, but as we get into the afternoon, it should hopefully melt away. And then we're in the clear Saturday and Sunday. First bit of rain and snow starts to move in at 7 a.m. on Monday. That continues to fill in 1 p.m. Monday. The key thing to see here is how different this looks than the last storm that moved through. The last storm that moved through, we had heavy snowfall into West Virginia and Virginia, getting 6 inches of snow up there. We had heavy ice accumulations throughout actually most of Virginia, and then working into North Carolina, getting a half an inch of ice up to even an inch of ice in some places. With this one, with those warmer temperatures, looks like it's mostly going to be rainfall. Last little bits and some heavy rainfall building into the coast, 7 p.m. on Monday, and then it's gone by 1 a.m. on Tuesday. So I would say that's pretty encouraging. Doesn't look like we're going to be getting major impacts there. While there is some heavy rain, it looks to be a pretty fast-moving storm, so there shouldn't be all that much flood threat as we get into Monday, because before you know it, the storm is gone. Great to see that it's not going to be an ice storm there. So let's follow this system again, backing back out, and then we're going to move back up north from where we just were. That storm over the Pacific Northwest right now goes into the center of the country, gets some moisture from the Gulf of Mexico, brings some snow to the Midwest, especially lake effect snow to Michigan, and then it brings that heavy rain to places like Virginia and North Carolina, and then at the same time, it's bringing that snow to the Northeast. So we are going to be looking at that, but we also have to look at what's going on right now, because right in the corner of the screen here, you can see Winter Storm Viola is still affecting the Northeast. It would be affecting it a lot more if that low was right along the coast here, because that's where you're pushing in moisture, pulling down cold air. That's where you get maybe a foot of snowfall. But as you can see, this low decided to take a more oceanic path and moved farther off into the Atlantic. That was something we were talking about and following all week long. What was that low going to do? Because if it moves right along the coast, that's where you get heavy snowfall. If it moves straight off into the Atlantic, you get almost no snowfall. But as you can see, it's close enough to still be getting some snow throughout, all the way from New Jersey up into Maine as that low moves up out of the Atlantic. So let's just click back through there because that was a little bit scattered. That was early this morning, getting that snow throughout. You'll notice it's mostly the places closer to the ocean that are getting that snow. Where you're closest to the ocean is where you're getting the heavier snow. That's because the low is all the way out here. And then as it moves off, looks like Maine for the most part is missing out with that one. Let's take a look at the total accumulated snowfall with that one. It looks to be about maybe 1 to 2 more inches being picked up in Pennsylvania, 1 to 2 more inches in New York. Parts of Massachusetts are getting very close to that bullseye of where you're almost getting a foot of snow. So it'll be interesting to watch and see if that bullseye of snow moves a little bit closer to Michigan. If that happens, then you'll have greater impacts. But as of right now, looks like you're just missing out on that bullseye of snow right there. Now, if we back up to the regional view, now let's look as we get into Saturday and Sunday. Looks like you're in the clear throughout most of the weekend, and then that new system starts to push in. At first brings some heavy snowfall to western Pennsylvania and western New York, and then that heavy snowfall where you're getting maybe 0.1 to 0.2 inches per hour moves into eastern Pennsylvania, while all of New York, and especially downwind of the Great Lakes, is where you're getting some heavier snowfall rates there. Then that's going to move, bring some snow to Vermont, New Hampshire, places like Maine, and then that just moves off. And then you get that last little trail effect right there as the winds continue to move over the lakes, lead to some lake effect snow. So now let's take into account that system, not getting any more snow throughout the weekend. And then as that moves through, you can actually see the 2 different waves. So right there, that's the first wave. Looks like with that first wave, we're totals in Pennsylvania getting up to 4 to 5 inches. Bullseyes in New York could have above 6 inches, as well as Vermont, but for the most part, 2 to 4 inch range. And then there's that second wind of the storm that we noticed happening after the storm, where it brings in even more lake effect. Looks like almost all of New York getting 6 to 10 inches of snow total by next Thursday. So that's also taking into account Winter Storm Viola, but the totals weren't all that great with that one. Or I shouldn't really say great, depends on your outlook on snow, but they weren't all that large, I'll put it that way. But with this second system, looks like most of New York getting over 6 to 8 inches, as well as Vermont, New Hampshire, parts of Massachusetts in that 6 to 8 inch range as well. But like we saw earlier, Maine, for the most part, missing out on both of these storms. In total, by this time next week, only getting 1 to 2 inches in the northern parts of the states, and then maybe 2 to 4 inches in the southern parts of the states. The real strip right there is going from western Pennsylvania and western New York right through Massachusetts and New Hampshire. So first, let's zoom in and see the last little effects of Viola. You can see 1 p.m. Friday, we're still getting that snow in Massachusetts and New Jersey. That's going to continue into tonight, into 7 p.m., still getting that light snow. And then we're in the clear throughout almost all of Saturday, Sunday, and then the first little bits of that new system start pushing in 1 p.m. on Monday as snow works into parts of eastern Pennsylvania and New Jersey. That snow moves into Massachusetts as parts along the coast where your temperatures are now warmer. We talked about that a lot throughout this video, the warming trend. That's where you're just going to be getting rain with that system as it goes through. And then there's that last little bit, the trail end we were talking about, where you might get a little bit more snow 7 p.m. on Tuesday. If we want to see the totals, that's, I believe, the last bit of Viola right there. That's what you're expected to pick up throughout the rest of the day today. So there are places in Massachusetts that are getting 4 to 5 inches throughout the day today. Still some more snow to come. And remember that little bullseye, if you look very closely, you can see the little tiny purple spot right there. Right to the east of that is where we're getting a foot of snow dropping into the Atlantic. It will be interesting to see if some of that ends up falling here in Massachusetts. But as you can see, Boston, over 3 inches of snow. New York City could get another 3 inches. Philadelphia looks like you're going to be about 1.5 inches with the trailing effects of Winter Storm Viola throughout the day today. Now, as that next system moves through, that's where it pushes in. And by about this time next week, you can see parts of eastern Pennsylvania getting 6 inches, 6 to 8 inches in New York, 6 to 8 inches as well in Massachusetts. Total this time next week, Boston, you should be at 6 inches. New York City, possibly getting up to 3. Philadelphia, only getting a little bit of snow with that second system because you're mostly where there's rainfall. Now, with that second system, let's also look at the timing for Pennsylvania. Looks like by 1 p.m., you're not feeling Winter Storm Viola anymore, just maybe some light lake effect snow throughout the day today. Then that new system first shows up 1 a.m. Monday. The heavy snowfall builds in 7 a.m. Monday, and then eastern Pennsylvania gets that heavy snowfall 1 p.m. Monday. Then it almost clears up, and the second little burst of it comes through northeastern Pennsylvania into western parts of New York, getting snow around 1 p.m. on Tuesday, and then that's going to clear up as we get into midweek next week. Looking at the totals, that's what's left to fall with Winter Storm Viola. Most of that has already fallen this morning. By the time we get into the afternoon, Pennsylvania is in the clear. 1 to 2 inches possible in total throughout the day today, and with the last effects of Viola. With that light lake effect snow, maybe another inch or 2 up there near Jamestown, right downwind of the Great Lakes. And then as that new system comes in, you see it hits the western parts of the state first. That makes sense because the storm's moving from west to east. And then it moves into the eastern parts of the state. And then that second blast comes in right there. That's where almost all of northern Pennsylvania, the northern half, is at least getting 6 inches, possibly more than that. Whereas the southern half of the state looks to be getting 2 to 4 inches by about midweek next week. And it also looked like the bulk of that was coming in that second wave of the system. So let's look at New York as well. There's the last effects of Viola, continuing to get some snow and some lake effect snow throughout the day today. Looks like Saturday you're in the clear. First traces of the new storm come in 7 a.m. on Monday. Heavy snow building in between 7 a.m. and 1 p.m. as almost all of New York is getting snow. And then the second wind of that storm comes in 1 p.m. on Tuesday. And then we get some more lake effect snow, and then it's gone. So in total, let's check out what we're expected to get throughout the day today with the last effects of Viola. New York City, like I said, could be getting 2.5 to 3 inches more of snow with Viola, but for the most part, just an inch or two throughout the state as that system moves through and is gone. Then as we click through to that new system, looks like when that first wave moves through, there's parts of western New York and some of the higher elevations that could be getting 5 inches, and then that second part of the system is what can push us into the 6 to 8 inch range. And at this point next week, at this time next week, majority of New York has picked up 6 to even 9, maybe even 10 inches of snow, over a foot in that one little bullseye there, where we continually get some of that lake effect continuing to pile on. So we're going to have to keep our eye on that. That's a ways off in the forecast. A lot can change, and we'll certainly watch that system carefully, as that looks like it could be dropping some significant snowfall. When I say that, it means 6 to 8 inches, maybe even a foot. So we'll keep our eye on that storm as it works from the northwest into the Midwest and finally into the Northeast, where this time next week, that's how much snow we could have picked up. So next, I want to do something a little bit different. We usually don't do this because I usually have the motto that I don't trust a weather forecast more than 3 days out. But just for fun, since it's Friday, we're going to take a long-range look at what kind of weather we can expect over the next week, over the next 2 weeks, throughout the rest of winter, and then going very far out, what we can expect over the next 3 months. So just clicking through here, you can notice what we talked about today. We've got Winter Storm Viola moving out of the Midwest. We've got that new system pushing through the Northwest right now, and then moving into the Midwest and the Northeast. And then let's see what's after that. This is just kind of for fun, not exactly saying any of this is going to happen, just curious to look. It looks like, for the most part, we have pretty calm weather towards midweek next week. And then the next little southern snowstorm looks like it could be coming in Thursday the 26th into Friday. We'll have to keep our eye on that one. And then possibly a big storm towards the end of February, where Michigan could be getting some heavy snow as heavy rain goes all the way through the southeast and into Pennsylvania. Then it looks like another storm could be showing up that's as far out as the forecast goes. So for the most part, it looks like midweek next week is actually going to be pretty calm. And then we just have a couple systems as we get into next Thursday and Friday that we'll have to keep our eye out for. Now, that's not very reliable there. If we want to see it another way, there's that system we were tracking throughout this video as it moves into the Midwest and Northeast. Then it looks like there's that another little trough, but it doesn't look like that ever actually turns into anything. And then I believe that's the one that was showing up as those possible storm systems towards this time next week. And it looks like a big trough possibly filling in after that. Now, those aren't all that likely, but let's just see total snowfall we can be expecting throughout. Let's just go to the beginning of the forecast and click backwards. That's probably an easier way to do it. Looks like by March 1st, so I guess this isn't actually that far in the forecast. This is at least probably a close resemblance of what it's going to look like. Washington, I would actually agree with that part of the forecast, because most of that should be falling in the next few days towards the start of this next week, where parts of the northern Cascades should be getting 3 to 4 feet of snow. That snow working all the way down through Idaho, getting that bullseye. For the most part, it looks like California is missing out on the storms over the next 2 weeks. Looks like the Midwest should be getting some decent snowfall, with the Northeast as well, most likely due to that system we were talking about throughout this entire video. I believe that's where most of that snow is going to be falling right there. So that's just looking at the weather models and what they're expecting. Where climate forecasts actually get more accurate is when you're looking at the climatology models. And that's what the CPC does. That's what the Climate Prediction Center does. That's what all the rest of the maps I'm going to show you are from. These are going to be more accurate representations of what the temperature and precipitation is going to look like throughout the next 2 weeks, throughout the rest of winter, and throughout the next 3 months. So just first, let's look at the 6 to 10 day temperature probability outlook. So key thing to think about here is this is showing probabilities. This is showing that Idaho has a very high probability of being below average temperatures over as we go 6 days into the future into 10 days of the future. Then as you stretch down into Arizona, that's where there's just a slight probability that you're going to be below average temperatures. You can see what's great to see is as we look at the eastern half of the country into the Minnesota, the Midwest, down into Texas, that's where we're actually expected to be above average temperatures in that 6 to 10 day average. I'd say that's great to see because that's where that Arctic air has just been constant over the last week or two. It started in Minnesota and then it's still being felt in Texas, but this should at least give you some hope and it's some good news because it's a warming trend. It's already started in Texas, even though it might still feel absolutely freezing because it's still 35 degrees below average. It has been warming, and it looks like that warming trend is going to continue. As we look at the 8 to 14 day temperature probability outlook, there's a pretty clear split here. Almost the entire western half of the country, or I should say thirds, the western third is expected to be below average temperatures for our 8 to 14 day average. The middle part of the country is just mild, that's right along the average, and then the eastern third of the country is above average temperatures. So it's a clear split right there. But again, I'm happy to see this because the Midwest down into Texas and then Louisiana, basically the entire eastern half of the country has been getting all that cold Arctic air. So it's good to see that they're expected to be changing into warm air for that 8 to 14 day average. If we look at a 1 month average, it paints a little bit different. It paints a different picture. It looks like for the most part, the northwestern part of the country is just mild. It's right along the average. And then from the northeast to the Midwest, all the way down into Texas, is where we're expected to be above average. And the key thing to look at here is the colors. So when it has a darker color, that doesn't mean it's going to be much, much warmer there, whereas that's only going to be slightly warmer. It means the probability that it's going to happen. So this looks like a 1 month average. It looks like there's a high probability that Texas is going to have above average temperatures over the next month. That is absolutely great to hear, as it is still 35 to 40 degrees below average there right now. Many places still below freezing. We do still have that hard freeze warning in effect, something to keep your eye on throughout tonight, as many people are still without power working through Texas and Louisiana. But it looks like over a month average, there's a high probability that Texas is going to be switching to above average temperatures. So that is great to see there. And it actually increases in the 3 month average. When we look at the 3 month average, almost the entire country is expected to have above average temperatures, and especially down here in Texas, where there is a high probability that they're going to be above average. They're going to be nice and warm. Might not seem like it if you're living in Texas right now and it's ridiculously cold, but there is good news on the horizon. It should start, it already has started warming up. Might not feel like it right now, but it has started warming up now, and it looks like that's going to continue in your 6 day forecast, your 14 day forecast, your 1 month forecast, and your 3 month forecast. So if you're sick of the cold, it looks like you're not going to have to deal with it on average over the next 3 months. So we can also do the exact same thing when it comes to precipitation. And again, this isn't showing there's going to be a lot of rain in parts of Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio, and then maybe some slight rain here in Iowa. It just means the probabilities. And something you'll notice here is that the probabilities aren't all that dark. So that's gives you a good idea of how hard it is to predict precipitation. We're just predicting some chance of precipitation going from Washington down through Idaho, Montana, and Wyoming. That makes sense, keeping in mind a lot of the storms we're talking about today, where they're just moving through the very northern parts of the state, especially that second part of the system that we were talking about when we were looking just at Washington. That makes sense as those systems move through the Pacific Northwest there, move to the center of the country. When they get to the center of the country, that's where they start to pull in some moisture from the Gulf of Mexico, and then they typically move up and into the Midwest and Northeast. So it looks like there's going to be almost like a trough, this might just be the jet stream setup right here, bringing in these Pacific Northwest storms, bringing them to the center of the country, and then pushing them up into the Midwest and Northeast. And again, that's our 6 to 10 day precipitation probability outlook. So that's the average from 6 days out to 10 days out. Another key thing to see here, California for the most part looks like we're going to be dry, which makes sense when we clicked all the way through that precipitation map and didn't look like California was getting all that much, especially when you get anywhere below the very northern parts of the state. Looks like Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio, though, and working into Kentucky as well, that's going to be the key spot we're looking at for storms in the next 6 to 10 days. As we look at the 8 to 14 day average, this actually matches what was going on with the temperatures as well. Let's see if we can find the 8 to 14 day temperatures where there's this split in the middle of the country, below average in the west, above average in the eastern half of the country. Looks like that's what's expected for precipitation probability as well when we get to our 8 to 14 day average. Looks like the west for the most part is going to be dry 8 to 14 days out, and then the eastern half of the country is where we're going to be getting some precipitation. And if I had to think of reasons for this, you might think, well, it's going to be cold here, so wouldn't you expect more winter storms if it's cold and then more precipitation here? But I mean, I'm just going off of a guess here. I'll have to look into this further, but I'm thinking with that warm air, it's going to really be depending on the moisture coming in